Robert placed Margaret's hand over his heart. She could feel the rapid, heavy beat against her own palm. "It's still racing," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that had been buried for 2 decades. "Just like it always has, especially now with you this close." He leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was achingly slow, a tender exploration of a moment he had only ever allowed himself to dream of. It was soft and sweet and felt like coming home. With trembling fingers, Margaret began to undo the buttons of his shirt, one by one. Her touch was hesitant, electric, and as her fingertips brushed against the firm muscles of his chest, Robert drew in a sharp, quiet breath. A soft gasp escaped him. "Margaret!" Her own breath hitched as she worked her way down, her movements growing more confident. Slowly, deliberately, the zipper on her dress began its descent, a quiet sound in the still room. The soft, white skin of her shoulders was revealed, and the sight made Robert's breathing grow ragged, his control fraying at the edges. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his eyes full of a reverence that stunned her. "More beautiful than I ever let myself imagine." A faint blush colored her cheeks. You imagine this?" "Every night," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "For 20 years. That night, in the quiet sanctuary of her home, we finally let go of the past that had kept us apart. It wasn't just a physical act. It was a collision of years of unspoken feelings, a fierce and desperate need to reclaim the time we had lost. It was an explosion of emotion, of two souls finally finding their other half. But how did we get here? How did a hostess from a private karaoke lounge and a successful construction magnate, who were once sister-in-law and brother-in-law, find their way back to this moment? Our story truly begins 6 months earlier, under the glittering, unforgiving neon lights of downtown Chicago. The city was alive, a symphony of traffic and distant sirens, but inside the upscale karaoke lounge, the world was muted by plush carpets and soundproofed walls. The air hummed with forced laughter and the clinking of glasses. "Come on, Robert, we closed the biggest deal of the year today. We have to celebrate." "Just one drink," my junior colleague, David, insisted, his youthful energy almost too much to bear. At 55, I still cut a sharp figure in a well-tailored suit. I ran a successful construction firm, a testament to decades of relentless work. But tonight, I felt every one of my years. "All right, David. 1 hour. That's it." I finally relented, a sigh escaping my lips. Walking down the dimly lit corridor, a strange sense of unease settled over me. It felt like stepping back in time, into a life I had deliberately left behind. I hadn't set foot in a place like this in 20 years. Not since, well, not for a very long time. The door to our private VIP room swung open. "I'll call for a couple of hostesses to join us," David said cheerfully, already pulling out his phone. "No, not for me," I said quickly, waving a hand in dismissal. "You go ahead, but I'm fine." But David was already on the phone, his voice a low murmur. 10 minutes later, the door opened with a soft click. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm here to make sure you have a wonderful time." The moment I heard that voice, the bourbon in my glass trembled, sending tiny ripples across the amber liquid. I lifted my head slowly, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. And there she was, standing in the doorway, wearing a simple, elegant red dress, was a woman who had haunted my dreams for half my life. Time seemed to freeze. It was Margaret, my brother's ex-wife. Now 45, she possessed a mature, devastating beauty that far surpassed the memory I had clung to for 2 decades. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second her professional smile faltered. Her steps halted. A flash of shock, of pure astonishment, crossed her face before it was quickly masked by a cool, practiced composure. "Robert," she said, her voice a little tight, "it's been a long time. You've changed." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. David, sensing the sudden, thick tension in the room, mumbled something about needing the restroom and made a swift exit, leaving us alone in the suffocating silence. Margaret moved with a practiced grace, seating herself next to me on the plush leather sofa. Her arm brushed against mine, and the simple contact sent a jolt through me. I took a deep, shaky breath, the familiar scent of her perfume, jasmine, it was always jasmine, filling my senses. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. My mind reeled back through the years. My older brother, Tom, had bankrupted his business with reckless gambling, losing everything. He dragged Margaret down with him, and they divorced 10 years ago. It was then that I'd lost all contact with her, the woman I had secretly, hopelessly loved from the moment I met her when I was 25. "Surprised? So am I," she said, her tone carefully neutral as she crossed her legs. "I heard about your success, a major player in the construction world. That's incredible, Robert. Truly." Her full breast pressed lightly against my arm as she settled in, and I had to fight the urge to pull away, to put some distance between us. The proximity was overwhelming. "So," she continued, her gaze direct, "did you ever get married?" "No, I never did." "A successful man like you? Why not? You must get lonely." She leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The scent of jasmine grew stronger, clouding my thoughts. How could I tell her the truth? How could I say, it was because of you, because I loved you, my brother's wife, and after you were gone, no other woman ever stood a chance. Asterisk. "I guess I just never met the right person," I mumbled, the words feeling hollow and false. Her hand came to rest on my knee. Even through the fabric of my trousers, I could feel the warmth of her touch, a warmth that spread through me like a slow-burning fire. "Well," she said softly, "since we've run into each other like this, if you're lonely, maybe I could be a companion for you." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the one in my memories. The only real differences were the fine lines around her eyes, etched by time and hardship, and a deeper, more world-weary fragrance that now clung to her. "We could meet regularly," she proposed, her voice all business now, "for, say, $3,000 a month." What would that entail?" I asked, my own voice trembling slightly. "Companionship. You're lonely, and I need to make a living. It's not strange. We just have dinner, talk, maybe have a drink together like this sometimes." Her fingers began to slowly, gently stroke the back of my hand. My heart was a drum against my ribs. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to refuse, to walk away and preserve the sacred memory I had of her. But the feelings I had buried so deep for 20 years were clawing their way back to the surface, raw and undeniable. "I can even draw up a contract if you'd like," she offered, reaching into her purse. "Keep things clean and simple." She pulled out a small notepad and a pen, her fingers slender and elegant as she began to write. "So, what do you think, Robert?" she asked, leaning toward me again. The neckline of her dress dipped, revealing the smooth, pale skin of her collarbone, and I found myself unable to look away. I'll think about it," I stammered. "All right," She tore the page from the notepad, her smile now carrying a hint of practiced seduction that was a world away from the innocent, genuine smile I remembered. Call me at this number when you've made up your mind. By the time David returned, Margaret was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of jasmine and a small piece of paper that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. Boss, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I didn't answer, my fingers closing around the number in my pocket. An entire week passed. Every day, I took out that piece of paper and stared at the number she had written. Finally, on a cold Thursday evening, my hand shaking, I dialed. Hello, Margaret? It's Robert. A brief silence hung on the line. Then her voice a little softer now. You know, we haven't been family for 10 years. You don't have to be so formal. Just call me Margaret. Another pause. So, does this mean you've made your decision? Yes, I said, my voice barely audible. I'd like to meet and talk about it. How about Saturday, 7 o'clock, at the restaurant in the Drake Hotel? That Saturday, I arrived 30 minutes early, my palms sweating as I sat at the reserved table. At precisely 7 o'clock, she appeared. She was wearing an elegant black dress, and she looked like a completely different person. The flashy hostess from the karaoke lounge was gone, replaced by a woman of stunning grace and sophistication. Have you been waiting long? She asked. No, I just got here, I lied. As she sat down, that familiar, subtle fragrance of jasmine enveloped me again. I busied myself with the menu, avoiding her gaze, a single thought echoing in my mind. What am I doing? I know this must feel strange, I began cautiously. A deal is a deal, Robert. It's best not to overthink it, she replied, her voice calm and reassuring. I nodded, feeling a small measure of relief. The terms she laid out were simple, almost clinical. All right, I said, my decision made. Let's do it. As dinner was served, we started to talk, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared past. How is Tom doing? I asked, the question feeling heavy in my mouth. We divorced 10 years ago, she said, her expression clouding over for a moment. After the business failed, he got heavily into drinking. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm so sorry, I said, a pang of guilt hitting me. I didn't know. I should have been there to help. It's in the past, and it was never your fault, Robert. She took a delicate sip of her wine, a smudge of red staining the rim of the glass. But why this job? I asked, gesturing vaguely. It's how I get by, she said, her voice matter of fact. I don't have many skills, and at my age, this pays the bills. Her tone was stoic, but I could hear the undercurrent of pain she was trying so hard to conceal. Just then, I noticed a faint silvery scar on her wrist as she reached for her glass. What happened to your wrist? I asked before I could stop myself. She quickly pulled her hand back, tucking it under the table and adjusting her sleeve to cover it. Don't ask, she said, her voice suddenly cold. We're not in that kind of relationship. After dinner, we shared a cab heading toward her neighborhood. As she gazed out at the passing city lights, she slowly leaned her head against my shoulder. I'm so tired, she murmured. My heart started to pound all over again. This was it. This was the simple, innocent moment I had dreamed of for 20 years. Her breathing became slow and even, and I realized she had fallen asleep. I couldn't bring myself to wake her. I just sat there, frozen, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the warmth of her body against mine. It was both heaven and hell. "We're here," the driver announced, and Margaret slowly opened her eyes. "Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I must have dozed off." "It's okay," I said, my voice softer than I intended. She stepped out of the cab and turned back to look at me. "I'll see you next week, Robert." And then she leaned in and gave me a quick, light kiss on the cheek. I sat there for a long time after the cab drove away, unable to move, the ghost of her lips burning on my skin. The next month completely upended my life. The highlight of my week, the only thing I looked forward to, was my Saturday evening with Margaret. I found myself staring out my office window, lost in thought, her face swimming in my vision. "You seem a lot happier these days, Mr. Evans," my assistant commented with a smile. "Do I?" I replied, a smile touching my own lips without my permission. What I didn't know, what I hadn't allowed myself to consider, was that our arrangement wasn't exclusive. She was still seeing other clients. One Tuesday evening, an overwhelming urge to see her washed over me. I hailed a cab and headed to her apartment, timing it for when I thought she'd be getting home from work. I rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. "Are you looking for Margaret?" a neighbor, an older woman walking her dog, asked as she passed. "Yes, is she not home?" "Oh no. She left with a gentleman about an hour ago." My heart plummeted. "A gentleman?" "Yes, a man in a suit. Looked to be about your age." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank down onto the steps of her apartment building, a bitter mix of jealousy and fury churning in my gut. This was the deal, I reminded myself. This was the arrangement. But my heart refused to listen. I decided to wait. I calculated when she might return and stood across the street, a shadow in the cold. 10 o'clock came and went. Then 11. Then midnight. The December wind cut through my overcoat, chilling me to the bone, but I couldn't leave. It was nearly 2 in the morning when a taxi finally pulled up. She got out. She was alone. "Robert?" she said, her voice filled with shock as she saw me. "What on earth are you doing here?" "Who was he?" I demanded, my voice shaking with cold and anger. "A client," she replied coolly, her expression unreadable. "Nothing more, nothing less." "A client," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Reality came crashing down on me. I had no right to be angry. I was a client, too. "Are you angry with me?" she asked, her voice softening just a little. I turned to leave, the shame suddenly unbearable. But she reached out and grabbed my arm. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time, her voice held a note of genuine sincerity. I was thoughtless. Please, will you come up? I can make you some tea." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Her apartment was neat and tidy, but it had a certain loneliness to it, a lack of personal warmth. "Would you like some coffee?" "I'm fine," I said, sinking onto her small sofa. She sat down next to me, leaving a careful distance between us. "You misunderstood," she began gently. "We really just had dinner. That was all." "It doesn't matter," I said, a bitter smile on my face. "It's your business." "It seems like it does matter to you," she said, looking at me intently, her eyes searching mine. I think she saw the pain there. "Robert," her hand covered mine. "I'm sorry." The following Saturday, I went to the karaoke lounge to pick her up for our scheduled meeting at the hotel. I arrived early and waited in the lobby, my heart still in turmoil. And then I saw her, near the hotel entrance, talking to another man. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, and he had his hand on her shoulder in a way that felt far too familiar. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All reason, all logic vanished. "Margaret!" I called out, my voice louder than I intended as I strode toward them. "Robert, what are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of panic. "Who is this?" I demanded, glaring at the other man. "Oh, I'm just a client," the man said, quickly removing his hand. "We were just saying hello." Margaret shot him a look, and he quickly excused himself, sensing the explosive atmosphere. "Robert, what was that?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "You're embarrassing me." "I'm sorry," I muttered, looking down at my shoes. "If you're going to be like this, then let's just end this right now," she said, turning to walk away. "No!" I grabbed her hand, my grip desperate. "Please, I'm sorry. I've never felt like this before. I don't know how to handle it." My voice cracked with an honesty that surprised even me. She let out a long, weary sigh. "Then let me make a suggestion." "Anything. You want me to stop seeing other men? You want me to quit this job?" she asked, her eyes narrowed. "I can do that. For a price." "I'll pay it," I said without hesitation. She thought for a moment. $8,000 a month. For an exclusive contract. "Done," I said instantly. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "All right, then our new arrangement starts today." "Good," I said, my heart soaring with a desperate, possessive relief. "Let's go to your place. We need to talk." Back at her apartment, sitting on the sofa, she poured us both a glass of wine. "You know," I began, my voice quiet, "20 years ago, all I wanted was a chance to sit and talk with you like this." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "I know. I remember. I saw the way you used to look at me, Robert. It was different. You knew. A woman always knows," she said softly. "Then why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I was your brother's wife," I said, taking a sip of wine. "I'm not his wife anymore," she replied, her gaze meeting mine, holding it. "The scar on your wrist," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to know." She hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve. The scar was thin and white against her skin. "It was from my husband," she said, her voice flat. "From Tom. That bastard." I breathed, gently taking her wrist in my hands. "Does it still hurt?" "Not anymore." I lifted her wrist to my lips and pressed a soft, reverent kiss directly onto the scar. I felt a tear fall from her eye, landing on my hand. "Robert." The distance between us vanished. I was enveloped in her scent, in her warmth. My hand came up to cup her cheek, my thumb stroking the soft skin. I'd imagined this touch 1,000 times, and the reality of it made my breath catch in my throat. "I've thought about you every day for 20 years, I confessed. I took her hand and placed it over my heart, letting her feel the frantic, undeniable proof of my words. "It's still racing," she whispered, her eyes wide. "So is mine," I admitted, "just being this close to you." And then I kissed her. It was a kiss that held 2 decades of longing, of regret, of unspoken love. It was soft and sweet, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her trembling fingers found the buttons of my shirt, and as her touch grazed my skin, I drew in a sharp breath. The zipper of her dress came down, revealing the pale, perfect curve of her shoulders. "You're so beautiful," I murmured against her skin. even more beautiful than I remembered. You remembered? She asked, a blush spreading across her cheeks. Every single day, I confessed. I kissed the soft skin of her neck, breathing in the mix of her perfume and the warm, intoxicating scent of her skin. We found ourselves lying side by side, just looking at each other. My hand traced the gentle curve of her waist, marveling at the feel of her. You've taken such good care of yourself, I whispered. You don't look a day older. I had to, she replied, a playful glint in her eyes as her nails lightly scraped down my back. For a day like this, the dam of restrained emotion finally broke. I never knew you were so bold, I chuckled. I am, she whispered back, with the people I care about. In that moment, we became one. That night, we gave ourselves to each other completely, a fierce and passionate reclaiming of all the years we had lost. The next morning, I woke first. Margaret was sleeping peacefully in my arms, the morning sun casting a golden glow on her face. In that light, she looked exactly like the 25-year-old woman I had first fallen in love with. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. Good morning, she whispered. Did you sleep well? Yes, she said, snuggling closer. For the first time in a long, long time. From that day on, everything was different. 3 months passed in a blur of quiet happiness. Margaret quit her job at the lounge, and we spent our time together, rediscovering each other, building something new. But one night, her phone rang, and the past came crashing back in. Margaret, can you hear me? It was her ex-husband, my brother, Tom. His voice was slurred with alcohol. What do you want, Tom? I heard you're having a good time with my little brother. Isn't that cozy? He sneered. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me. I know everything. The line went dead. A cold dread filled her. She didn't tell me about the call, not wanting to shatter the fragile peace we had found. A few days later, while she was home alone, Tom showed up, pounding on her door. Open up, Margaret. Go away, Tom. We're divorced. If you don't open this door, I'll break it down. Fearing he would do just that, she unlocked it. He stumbled in, reeking of whiskey, and shoved her hard. Having fun with my brother, are you? There's nothing going on between us. Liar! He roared, and he hit her. She fell, her head striking the sharp corner of a coffee table. Please, Tom, stop, she begged. But he didn't. He kept hitting her until she lost consciousness. A neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. Margaret was rushed to the hospital. I knew nothing about any of it. All I knew was that she had suddenly stopped answering my calls. 3 days later, I was at that same hospital visiting an employee when I ran into one of Margaret's friends in the hallway. Is Margaret really in the hospital? I asked, my heart seizing with fear. Yes, she's been here for 3 days. I ran to her room. Margaret! She was lying in the hospital bed, a bandage wrapped around her head, her beautiful face bruised and swollen. Robert, what are you doing here? She whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Why didn't you call me? I was so worried. I'm sorry. Who did this to you? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. My ex-husband, she sobbed. Tom. My face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Just then, a doctor entered the room. Are you family? He asked, looking at me. Yes, I said without a moment's hesitation, looking directly at Margaret. I'm her husband. Her eyes widened, and in them, I saw a reflection of the truth I had just spoken. "I can't live without you, Margaret," I said, taking her hand. "I can't either," she confessed, her voice thick with tears. "It started because of the money, but it's not about that anymore. I've fallen in love with you, Robert." "Then the contract is over," I declared. "I love you." I leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. Then, our lips met in a deep, desperate kiss, a confirmation of everything we both felt. "I'll protect you now," I promised her, and I saw in her eyes that she believed me. After Margaret was released from the hospital, our bond was stronger than ever, but our happiness was short-lived. My nephew Daniel, Tom's son, saw us together at a cafe, sitting close, holding hands. He immediately went to my family. "Uncle Robert is seeing Aunt Margaret." The news ripped through my family like a shockwave. "What?" My mother nearly collapsed. "To see this before I die." My 80-year-old mother was so distraught she refused to eat for days. An emergency family meeting was called. "How could you do this? With your own brother's ex-wife? It's a disgrace to this family." The condemnation was universal. The scandal bled into my professional life. At a board meeting, my personal life became a topic of discussion. "This reflects poorly on the company's image. As CEO, your behavior is inappropriate." Meanwhile, Margaret started receiving anonymous, threatening phone calls. "Take the money and disappear, or you'll regret it." The pressure was immense, suffocating. After nights of sleepless torment, Margaret made a decision that broke her own heart. "Robert, are you free tonight?" she asked over the phone, her voice heavy and strained. "Of course. Where should we meet?" "The lakefront, somewhere quiet." That evening, we met on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. She looked pale and exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. "What's wrong?" I asked, my heart aching at the sight of her. "You don't look well." She stared out at the dark, churning water for a long time before she spoke. "Robert," she began, her voice trembling, "we have to end this." My world tilted on its axis. "What? Why are you saying this all of a sudden?" "I've been so selfish," she whispered, tears beginning to trace paths down her cheeks. "This started because I needed money, but somewhere along the way, I really, truly fell in love with you, and that just made me more selfish. I don't understand. You're losing everything because of me, Robert. Your family has turned against you. You're having trouble at work. I can't do that to you. None of that matters to me." "It matters to me," she cried, her voice cracking. "Your mother isn't eating." She almost collapsed from the shock. "Because of me, you've gone from being a devoted son to a disgrace. From a respected businessman to the subject of gossip." "Margaret, I told myself I loved you, but all I've done is ruin your life," she said, her head bowed in shame. "I need to come to my senses. If I really love you, I have to let you go." "Don't say that." "I'm so sorry, Robert. It's all my fault. I should have said no from the beginning. I knew you'd had feelings for me for 20 years, and I used that. I'm a terrible woman. Everything they're saying about me, it's true. Stop it. Go back to your life, Robert. Please, just pretend I never existed." She stood up to leave. "Margaret," I reached for her hand. "I don't care about my family, or the company, or what anyone thinks." "No." She pulled her hand away. "Please, this is my last request. Let me go." She turned and walked away, her shoulders shaking. I stood there, frozen, watching her disappear into the darkness, the weight of the world pressing down on me. After she left, my life became a hollow echo of what it had been. I spent my evenings alone in my large, empty house. I couldn't focus at work. I barely ate. "You look terrible, boss," David said, his face etched with concern. Meanwhile, Margaret met with her friend, Sarah. "You really broke up with him?" "I had to," Margaret said, her voice devoid of all energy. "It was the right thing to do. But he's rich. You'll never get a chance like that again." "It was never about the money, Sarah." "Then what was it about?" "I really loved him," she confessed. "And that's why I had to let him go." Sarah sighed. "What does it matter who you were before? If it's real love, none of that should matter." But Margaret's resolve was firm. "I think I need to get away," she told her friend. "I'm going to go to Monterey for a while, just to be alone and think." While she was gone, I wrote to her every day. I sent text messages into the void, knowing she probably wouldn't read them, but it was the only thing that brought me any comfort. Asterisk Margaret, I thought of you again today. Without you, nothing makes sense. Asterisk. And then, I made a monumental decision. I handed over the reins of my company to David, my capable and loyal colleague. I sold my large house and used the money to buy a small, quiet building in a peaceful neighborhood. I was going to open a cafe. "Are you sure about this, sir?" David asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's time for me to do something I actually want to do," I told him. And as I stood in the empty space that would become my new life, I whispered to myself, "I'll wait for you, for as long as it takes." A week later, Margaret returned from California. She had seen an article online about my sudden retirement and the opening of a small cafe. From the airport, she took a taxi directly to the address she'd found. She pushed open the door, a small bell chiming her arrival. I looked up from behind the counter, and my heart stopped. "Margaret!" She smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "One coffee, please." I brewed her a cup, my hands shaking so badly I nearly spilled it. She took a sip, and a grimace crossed her face. "This is terrible," she said. I'm still learning," I stammered, my face flushing with embarrassment. She took another sip, then looked me straight in the eye. "I'll drink it, though," she said softly, "for the rest of my life." My face broke into the widest grin I'd felt in years. "Really?" "Yes, really," she said, her own eyes shining with tears. "I don't care what anyone else says. This is my life. Our life." In that small, quiet cafe, we found our way back to each other. She moved in with me into the small apartment above the shop. My family still disapproved, but we didn't care anymore. "As long as I have you, that's all I need," I told her, squeezing her hand. We ran the cafe together. She managed the front, greeting customers with her warm smile, while I perfected my coffee making in the back. Slowly, I got better. Our little cafe became a neighborhood favorite, known for its cozy atmosphere and the obvious love between its two owners. "You two are such a sweet couple," a regular customer commented one day. "Oh, we're not married," I'd reply shyly. "We just live together." The customer would always smile. "That's even better, like lifelong sweethearts." In the evenings, we would walk along the lakefront, hand in hand. "Are you happy?" she'd ask, leaning her head on my arm. "More than I ever thought possible," I'd reply. "I spent 20 years just dreaming of you, and now I get to have this." 6 months later, we changed the sign outside. It now read, Margaret's Cafe. Are you sure? She asked, her eyes wide. Putting my name on it? Of course, I said. This place means nothing without you. The cafe thrived, and so did our love. It was a love that hadn't faded with time. If anything, it had grown deeper, more precious. We still had the spark and excitement of a young couple. One afternoon, the bell on the door chimed, and my mother walked in. Mother, I said, shocked. One coffee, the 80-year-old woman said quietly, taking a seat at a small table. Margaret prepared it herself and served it to her. My mother took a slow, deliberate sip. It's good, she said. Then she looked from me to Margaret, a long, searching gaze. You look happy, son. I am, Mom. I'm happy. Then that's all that matters, she said. And with those words, the long winter between my family and me began to thaw. A year later, we were watching a young couple in the cafe, laughing and holding hands. Were we ever that young and in love? Margaret asked wistfully. We still are, I replied, taking her hand in mine. As the sun set, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of orange and pink, we sat by the window of our cafe, our hands intertwined. Our journey had been anything but easy. We had faced judgment, loss, and heartbreak, but we had found our way through it, proving that it's never too late for a second chance. We didn't care about the world's opinions anymore. We had each other, and that was more than enough.